I'll go ahead and get right into it. So, building research pathways for Black men brain health at HBCUs. And so, we just heard Dr. Ron Bailey give a great talk on that topic, and we're going to have some speakers lend their expertise and knowledge on how do we go about doing this, especially in today's climate, politically, societally, and with the shifting changes in some of the research priorities. So we have Dr. Ron Bailey. We also have Dr. Robert Newton, Dr. Anthony Jackson, and Dr. Leonard Swanee. All right, so let's give them a round of applause. And so one of my first questions, and we'll also take some questions from the audience as well, what are the priorities from each of you in your mind that need to be examined or addressed in order to build more research pathways for Black men brain health initiatives at HBCUs? And so we'll just go down the line.
How y'all doing today? I'm Dr. Anthony Jackson. I am the Vice Chancellor of Enrollment Management at Southern University. In the past few years, I was the Associate Vice Chancellor for Student Affairs. One thing I would say is that, to answer your question, is that we need to make sure that we open up different pathways, of making sure that we open up more pathways for players, not only and men, but pathways for them to actually know that, hey, look, we see you, we understand, but we also want to open up those pathways and let them know that we're here to help. So that's what I would say.
Yeah, briefly, I'd argue similarly. I think that there has to be opportunity. It has to be supported. I think that the reality is all too often persons hit a bump or a pothole in the road along the way. And in my experience, for African males, very often you get one chance. And then that's often a stoppage. So we've got to find ways, I think, provide that kind of resiliency support to the individuals who know where to go when there's some difficulty and until they keep going.
Yeah, and I'm Leo Swanee. I have the privilege and the honor to serve as the founding dean for the Xavier Oxford College of Medicine. And I would say one of the reasons I was compelled to be part of that and build a new HBCU medical school, this would be the 5th HBCU medical school in the United States, is that we need more physician scientists. Thank you. And we need more Black scientists, and we need more Black physicians. And you really, when you look at how research gets funded, how the NIH funds research, who is doing that research, if you don't have representation at the table, then the studies and the direction that the research goes is not necessarily going to meet the needs of a diverse community.
I'm Dr. Robert Newton. I'm a professor at the Pennington Biomedical Research Center, which is in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. It's affiliated with LSU. So I'm a clinical psychologist by training, and I do a lot of intervention work. And in my mind, in order for us to really, I guess a major priority, I would think, in terms of building more Black men's brain health work at HBCUs, it has to be an institutional priority. I think if it's not an institutional priority, then it's difficult to get money, it's difficult to get scientists there to do the work, it's difficult to get out into the community to convince African American men to be involved in research. So that's my personal opinion. I think it has to be an institutional priority, and then other things can fall into place.
Great. You know, one of the things I think about with trying to build these partnerships and these pathways is that there's a lot of mistrust when it comes to research, especially in the Black community. And okay, Black clinicians, Black researchers at a HBCU, it sounds great. Sounds like you check off all those boxes. So then the people should come, right? You've built it, therefore they should come. Is it really that easy or simple, or is there more to the conversations when trying to engage the community, especially Black men, that, hey, it's not just, it's at a HBCU, there's Black clinicians. What do you all think about that?
So I think that, especially at HBCU, I've been at every HBCU in the state of, I've worked at every HBCU in the state of Louisiana, with the exception of Dillard University. And one thing that I've been approached with is I think that the students, if they don't see their self in you, then that's a barrier, right? So first, we got to make, there's what, 4% of African American males who are clinicians or psychiatrists, right? They have to see their self in us, but we also have to be open and willing to allow them to come to us. So those HBCU barriers that we have, if those students are not open and they don't understand who we are, then they're not going to approach us. But we also, as professionals, have to be vulnerable as well by allowing them to come speak to us and allowing them to know who we are and allowing them to know that, hey, we don't have it together either. So that's one way that we're going to have to make sure that we address it.
Yeah, I'd argue that I think the responsibility remains dual for HBCUs and non-HBCUs that are in black communities to really reach out and meet the black community's needs. I will give an example. I interviewed for a role a decade ago at University of Chicago, which although not HBCU, it's right in the middle of 1 million African American people in the south side of Chicago. It was just remarkable how much there was, frankly, in my estimation, antipathy by much of the black community, lay people there, and friends of mine who were doctors out from National Medical in south side of Chicago because of the signals that had gone out from the university for a long period of time. There was just one big issue that they'd chosen to shut down and didn't have a level 1 trauma. So if you had trauma in south side of Chicago, you had to go 30 minutes to central Chicago or Northwest, where I guess Northwestern was in Loyola. And if you had something like a stroke, TPA only works in the first 15, 20 minutes. Those are things that the black community learns and understands and don't forget. So I think that all settings need to be very sensitive to issues that make it very clear that the needs of the community are a priority by the university and by the school, and that I think that efforts are made to ensure that those needs are being met consistently over time, whether it's in who we hire, what programs we support, where our funding goes. Those issues are not lost, I think, on communities, and I think that's important and wise for universities to be mindful of them and to honor them.
I couldn't agree more with the other two panelists, and especially the concept of, especially if you're going to build a college of medicine in a community, you have to be a community-based college of medicine, and HBCUs need to be, as well as other universities, need to be anchor institutions in their community. The one thing you don't want to do is you don't want to say, hey, I've got this big study, I'm getting funded, and I'm going to go in and try to recruit more minorities. I need minorities for the fund. The community will quickly pick up that you're coming to use them just for this study, and you're going to be out of there. And what have you done for me in the last 10 years? If you're an anchor institution in the community and you've developed that trust over years and you're present and you listen to their needs and you work with them to improve the community, then it's a different conversation when you have a research trial and you need more participants that are black and brown.
Yeah, I mean, 100%. Being involved in the community well before you approach any minority group with a research study. I also think that it's important that when we first go to the community with a research idea, after we have given and addressed their needs, it's important, in my mind, to lay out your program. It can't just be one program. It can't just be, well, we just want to do this one study. It's got to be, well, this is the study I want to do, and this is the next one, and this is the next one. I think also educating the public about the research process, because a lot of times the community doesn't understand, hey, I got to write this grant, that's going to take 3 months, then I got to send it off to the NIH or whomever, and that's going to take another 6 months, and then we might not get funding notifications for another 3 months, and we might not get the grant. Like, the whole process, I think, needs to be explained. And then another thing that's key is that you have to stay involved even when you don't have money. So even when you don't have a research study that's going on, it's critical that you maintain your presence within that community, because otherwise you are going to lose trust, and that's not the situation we want to be in. So,
I'm so happy to hear that, and there's the shared perspective. When I was first starting out, I met some community-based participatory researchers, and I told them, I want to do what you want to do. I mean, what you're doing. I'm like, I want to be like you. And they said, don't do that. It's too hard. It takes too much time. And it sounds like there has to be a lot of groundwork to build up. Is there a blueprint on this? Like, is there a checklist where I can just check off these things and because I'm in a phase where I'm trying to figure out, hey, work smarter, not harder. Where do researchers go to get this knowledge on how to do just what you all are describing?
Well, there's books on CBPR. I'm trying to remember who wrote the book. Get with me after, I'll tell you. There's also some very good articles that sort of lay out the thought process that one should have when they want to work within the community. And there are guidelines, but in terms of a checkbox, that's going to have to be individualized for the community that you're working with, the ideas that you have, who your partners need to be, those kinds of things. But there are very good guidelines for how to conduct CBPR and how to be involved in the community as a researcher.
Yeah, I don't know where there's a checklist that exists. There's certainly institutions that do it well. And you can look at all the HBCU schools of medicine that I would say put them in the list that do it well. The Harvard Business School had been funded to do a look at research in the U.S. This was about the time of the pandemic. And they wrote a couple of white papers, which I can get to you too, which does give a framework of, what's wrong with research in the U.S. and what are some things that we could do to make sure that research is representative and more effective. And I think a lot of that grew out of the pandemic, where what we learned is when we wanted to do clinical trials about a novel virus and see new therapeutics, the infrastructure of the U.S. to do those community-based research trials with large volumes really wasn't set up well. And that's actually what started that. But I think what came out of it is a lot of good ideas about how to integrate into the community and how you do this work.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that it's also essential to broaden, actually nationalize, I think, the base of mentorship. We see people who lost a follow-up because they kind of unfortunately think that kind of like when you're in, secondary school and college, your mentors, your advice, those who kind of lead the way for you are going to be those who you see in class and your supervisor alike. But the more detailed and the more specific your research interest is, the more you need to, I think, broaden that scope. Not only, I mentioned National Medical quite a bit, but I'm a psychiatrist, and the American Psychiatric Association does that now much better. So you could be a young person who wants to go into research on bipolar disorder, and you're in Oklahoma. You don't have to look just at people at your university or state of Oklahoma, but find somebody who's doing research in that area in many other places, and somebody who may find a way to partner with you in a way that's mutually beneficial, that helps them and helps you. And that's a measure that we have to do a better job getting out of to young people so they won't limit their options when it comes to the benefits of mentorship.
So, and I would add to that, I think that as we do research, we have to make sure that we understand our approach as well. So our approach and how we meet those communities, just like we said, it's not a blueprint to reaching the African American community. No, as Doc said earlier, what we usually do and how we reach out, we talk about barbershop talks or beauty shop talks. That's not the blueprint all the time, right? We have to make sure that we're able to break that barrier down from where we're looking at as well. So if we're able to go outside of our thinking pattern and actually be able to communicate to that portion of that community, that population that we're actually trying to reach, find a different way. Because what's happened in the past is they hadn't had this communication, they hadn't had this ability to engage in what you're offering. So it's upon us to make sure that we find a different way and understand the community that we're trying to service and who they are.
So one more question, and then we'll start taking questions from the audience as well. So, obviously with presidential administration changes, you're always going to see changes in priorities and policies and things of that nature. And I think about this Black Men Brain Health Conference. So I was in cohort 1, and would this type of conference have been funded if it was initiated under this new administration? or just even be a possibility. And so, what type of impact do you see for research institutions or researchers who want to look at Black men brain health? What's the impact going to be for the next 3 or 4 years? And how do they go about doing the work that they want to do and having the impact that they want?
Well,
No. That's a loaded question. I'm only.
yeah,
Professionals go first.
I think partly that it's not completely decided. So I think it's in some ways difficult to say, but I do think that there's going to be a change. I think that couching things under health disparity may work, but I think other forms of anything even closely related to trying to equalize health is going to be completely eliminated. And so I think that we're going to have to get creative in how we term our studies, because I think that we're going to be in an era where people are going to automatically, well, the systems will automatically sift through your titles and eliminate your grant based on words that you have in your title. And I think that it's going to come down to where reviewers are instructed that if this is the topic or this is the area and it's sort of couched under some other term, but you're really doing disparity, or not disparity, but DEI work, I think we're going to be instructed to eliminate those as well. So I think we're going to have to get really creative. And I think that we're going to have to find ways to do research in these populations, but without being so blatant about the population that we're intervening on.
Look, these are clearly concerning times, and it's a very unpredictable administration, if we're going to be honest. And so it's pretty hard to predict what this is going to look like 6 months from now, let alone a year from now, 2 years from now. There are midterms coming up in 2 years, though. So, but I would say, to your point, look, there are facts that just are unrefutable. We have health disparities in the United States. There are health inequities, and we need to learn more about those and implement new treatment pathways and programs to address those health inequities. And health equity is not just a race issue or a ethnicity issue or a gender issue. It also impacts lower socioeconomic groups from all race, gender, and ethnicities, and it also impacts rural areas compared to urban areas. And so I agree, if we can turn it into health equity and point out that this is really to benefit, it's a broad benefit, maybe that'll help. But it's hard to predict, I gotta be honest.
Well, I love the comments. 'Cause I think the reality is we are going to have to, it is hard to predict, but I think both of you are right. We're going to have to find ways to keep doing the work. Mm-hmm. And I think that I love both points, because the reality is there's a lot of meat there. The reality is America would be wise, regardless of the national leadership, to realize we're in a international competition for economy, for education, for innovation, for technology advancement. I got a son in the military, for war. So you don't win by excommunicating, so to speak, anyone with a chance to help you do best, I think, at the highest level. Many would argue that we have 300 million Americans. The country of India has a 300 million person middle class alone. So the competition is fierce. I think it's also true that you don't win the first time you pursue an effort. So you kind of keep pushing, and very often you develop a cure for this, or develop better technology for that, or the case may be, a second or a third iteration. So part, I think our challenge has to be to not stop thinking that you can turn it on and turn it off when you want to be best in class and whatever it is that your professional engagement kind of going forward. And I think to my colleagues' comments, I'd agree with both of them. The reality is we're going to have to depend on a government that I think is varied. There's more than, there are a lot of people in government at a lot of areas, the way we'll say it, and all of them need to be wise and understand the big picture. Because these are issues that have not just long-term, but really multi-generational risk for us, I think, as a society. So I would want to believe that as challenging as these first few days and weeks have been, that better heads will, and of course the valor will prevail.
I'd answer that by saying something that my grandmother probably would say is, she would say, baby, it don't matter who in the White House, who is God's house that matter, right? So the fact that God's house, God is in control, we're gonna be okay. In saying that, God also asks us to make sure that we put in place things like it's just not going to happen, right? We have to put in policy. We got a structured change in policy and advocating. So we got to have advocation and structured policy changes in order to make sure that we're addressing the issues. Like you said earlier, not just for our black and brown brothers, but for everybody. Figure out how to advocate and make sure that we're writing these policies for men and for women, but how are we making sure that these policies are open for everybody? Also, we have to make sure that we while we're advocating for policy change, a structured policy change, we're also advocating for insurance capabilities of, how's the insurance going to affect what we're doing? Will do some of the people that we're talking to, speaking of, do they have insurance? Would the insurance cover some of the things that we're seeing? So we gotta advocate for some policy changes and some structural changes in order for us to get to the place where we're trying to go. It matters not who's in the White House, but we have to make sure that we're moving forward no matter what.
It's great to hear. So I think we could take some questions out in the audience. I see a hand raised here if we have a mic out there. You got a mic.
Great discussion. I have two questions. One is about education, another about research. So we human beings, we have not yet figured out on how to individualize education. We still rely on group level metrics. People are compared against one another using standardized tests. So is there maybe, probably it is time to think of how to reach the individual student to get the best out of that student. If Einstein did not have a very strong supportive mother, I don't think he would have managed, because he had dyslexia. If he pursued language-based education, then he wouldn't have succeeded. Actually, he was not even in academic track. So he had to sit in some corner at a patent office, and he made the discoveries. Obviously, he was not on the tenured track or other standardized educational path. So I think we have not still solved this challenge. We have not come up with a method that will bring the best out of each student. So do you want to reflect on this? The second thing is research in almost all academic centers. You talk to the dean, you talk to the chair, you talk to your colleagues, it's always in terms of dollar. You have, how many RO1 do you have? Okay, so how many so it is, the conversation is not about the science, really. The science is talked later on. So I think probably HBCU can pioneer by turning the conversation into what type of exciting new ideas are brewing here, and how do we encourage students and faculty to think of new pioneering work regardless of funding opportunities. I think the conversation has to switch, has to change, in my opinion. So thank you.
So I'll try to answer that second part of the question about education and how we have to change it. So as I said before, I'm over enrollment management at Southern University in Baton Rouge. The chancellor, John Pierre, he has come in. He was hired last year, but he's come in. He asked me, hey, what are we doing? How do we do it? And how can we change what we call enrollment management? But not only that, we've created a plan where we can actually have the deans, the other vice chancellors, and the department heads involved in how we're changing the face of what Southern University is. So I think you're right in the fact that we have to have a team approach. We can go back to the old saying, each one teach one. We have to make sure that we're reaching the students by really trying to change what we do. We have to make our programs, I'm gonna say it, sexy. You know, we have to make them excited about what we have, but that's another part into the fact that about mental health, making the students understand who we are, giving them the chance to come to us, and being able to speak with us, breaking down those barriers that they would normally put up. It's the same thing with for me, with recruitment and enrollment. One part of your first statement is I like to share with my new students when I'm coming through orientation, but dyslexia is my superpower, right? So when I say that, I'm dyslexic. I'm also the vice chancellor and Dr. Jackson. So the people that used to say that you're slow and you don't know what you're doing, now they're calling me for a job, you know? So my mom did that. My wife supports me, right? So I think that you're right. And individualized, we have to figure out how each student learns, and that's a process that we haven't figured out, but I think we're working that way.
Yeah. I'll comment on the research. You know, NIH funds the majority of health research in the United States, and that's why representation counts. So if you say, well, sickle cell is a perfect example of that. That's been underfunded and under-researched for years because of the disparities. There was not representation at the table, and the money doesn't get distributed equally. So agree that HBCUs have a role to bring up these issues and focus on these issues. But there's another important thing to remember. If you want to do investigator-initiated research that's not going to be federally funded or National Science Foundation funded, Department of Defense funded, then you're going to have to fund that as an institution. Someone has to fund it. It's just not free. And that's another point of contention when you look at the endowments for HBCUs versus the endowments of a Harvard or a UPenn. I mean, you're talking $1 billion endowments. Now, I will tell you, Bloomberg made a big step to help with that. And last fall, Bloomberg gave $170 million to Howard, $170 million to Morehouse, $170 million to Meharry, $70 million to Charles Drew, and gave $5 million to us because we're just starting our med school as a planning grant to start it. But that whole initiative, that Greenwood initiative from Bloomberg, really is about to try to level set on the foundations, because that's, at the end of the day, the money's got to come from somewhere.
Bloomberg didn't give Hampton anything?
What?
Bloomberg didn't give Hampton anything? Just real quick on the second question, I think it's going to be very difficult to, I think that you can have creative ideas that are fostered by multidisciplinary teams, but I think if they're not in alignment with what NIH wants to fund, it's going to be very difficult to really get those off the ground. And I think that, going back to what was said earlier, I think one of the things that has to happen in order for those kinds of ideas to really take ground is that you have to get the workforce to get other kinds of grants to get within the system, to start serving as reviewers and SROs, because those are the people who make a difference in what gets funded, because those are people giving scores and those are people who are writing the NOFOs. So, but that's going to take time for that to happen. But I think you can still do creative work, but it may not be sometimes in the areas that you want until you get that workforce within the systems that make the decisions.
Thank you. I'm Dina Darlington, Links to Equity. Thank you so much for your time. Great panel discussion. You talked about having a blueprint for clinical trial, for community engagement around clinical trials and really engaging the community. What are your thoughts about health systems becoming more engaged in HBCUs and at a community level practices and purchasing those practices, but also managing the HBCU's sort of health system as well? How do you believe that will ultimately impact clinical trial? Because I think there's some thoughts that it could be a good thing, because if they're really doing well from a clinical trial perspective, they bring that over and they continue to build on it, and they have sort of their blueprint as well.
Look, I'll go first on that. I've actually spent a lot of time on that, especially because the Xavier Irish College of Medicine is a partnership between a health system, Oxford Health, and an HBCU. It's hard to start a new medical school, and just I'm going to get to the research question part, but I would just let me say this is, but to build these academic medical centers, you do need these types of partnerships. Because they increase resources. You need physicians, you need the clerkships to be able to train, and then you want to be able to do translational research that's impactful at the bedside, and you need the system to be able to do those clinical trials that are human clinical trials. That's in that white paper. Actually, that white paper, the Harvard Business Review, which I'll have to get to you guys. Part of that concept is in there, because one of the things we found with COVID was that the NIH had their process and had their system, and they were used to going to their usual suspects, which were the big universities that got most of their funding. And they put out some of these early COVID clinical trials, and they had no enrollment, very little enrollment, because the big universities don't have the patients. They're not with the health system. And so the NIH actually pivoted. They actually called Oxford Health in the middle of their active trials and knew that, well, we better go work with the health systems. They're actually the ones taking care of the patients. And they saw success with that. So I couldn't agree with you more. I think health systems also have to behave appropriately. They have to be in the community for a long time too, and show that they're vested in the community and build partnerships in the community. But if there's a health system has that type of community partnership and has built trust in the community, then you can foster clinical trials that way. And at the end of the day, that's where the patients are.
Any more questions?
Hello, my name is Alyssa Studvant. I'm a junior medical laboratory science major here at Xavier. I'm also a mental health ambassador for a nonprofit student organization called The Hidden Opponent, which focuses on student athletes. And I was just curious, since men's mental health influences their mental capacity and also the gradual decline of their mental capacity with age, what actions would your institutions and or other institutions be taking to put our Black men in better positions in their younger ages to combat Alzheimer's and Alzheimer's-related diseases that will come later on?
I'll jump in. I'm a psychiatrist, so I should comment about the mental health piece. But first, I just kind of come back to the early question. I think that there's just never enough money for all of these projects. As my colleagues pointed out, I think that you try to find collaborations, and hospitals tend to have more resources, and it looks like that's the direction we kind of go in for. This was probably the second half of my career. So by definition, I think that's actually likely the case. But I love the point that they also have a variety of patients, so more patients quantitatively, but also we need, as I think I said earlier, research that really matters. And I'm not sure how often lay people realize how often you do a clinical trial and the people who actually show up have been in 20 already. So the same persons have been assessed over and over and over again. It was a huge problem we had when we were in Houston. So love the idea, and I think the innovative thought like that is beneficial, and getting groups to buy in, I think makes a lot of sense. Well, what I'll say is a comment that, my son will pinch me for. I got a son that played college football for Navy. I'll brag about that a little bit. But I think we should play football later. I think that early brain trauma is not advantageous. You love these stories of the guys who played in the NFL and they didn't play at all until they were in the 10th or 11th grade or whatever. So fifth graders playing football, which my son did, so you could blame me for that, probably is not a good idea. I think that many of the laws that come into place that we do enforce matter. Saw a piece a few days ago about how many 90% of people who die in car wrecks now or get head trauma are not wearing a seatbelt. We just started wearing seatbelts till 1985, 40 years ago. So I'd argue that there are probably some new laws that need to be executed that lead to less risk. And I think the issue of CTE is an important item because probably, as I hope I said earlier today, chronic lower level so-called subtherapeutic trauma to the brain is cumulative and adverse, I think, over time. And I would argue that the combination of SUD, substance use disorders, and whether it's voluntary with football or sometimes involuntary with violence that young African-American males exposed to puts them at a higher risk of these dementing illnesses that we see later on. There are things we can do to decrease risk of brain trauma that can lead to brain disease in black males later in life.
Dr. Marcus Johnson of Texas Southern University. As we're talking about pathways to for HBCUs to study black men's brain health. So me being there, we're technically a R3 institution. So research, we're finally getting a focus on research. Me personally, I really didn't know about research until, after I got my doctorate degree and realized that, hey, if I want to be in this field, research is something that I'm gonna have to do. So my specialty is kinesiology. So with my students, especially in the kinesiology, research is nowhere on the radar. And I do, undergrad and graduate, as opposed to like maybe the students who are like in pharmacy or biology. So if I was because being here, being inspired, I would like to promote pathways at HBCU. What would you suggest? Like, should I introduce it to my students in undergrad? Should we wait and do it once they're in a master's or a doctorate program? What would be your suggestion?
I think one thing that you can do is there's different grants that are specific to HBCUs to do research. I forget what those numbers are. But the NIH has specific grants to build infrastructure at minority serving institutions in order to be able to do research in the future. So I would look into those grants. They also have R15s, I believe, which are really for investigators who want to do a small sort of trial. It can't be a clinical trial. It's a small trial to get your students exposed to research, and that can build to other projects down the road. So I would look for opportunities within the NIH or other funding agencies that are specific to minority serving institutions or smaller institutions that don't traditionally have a large amount of NIH funding. I would also look to partner with other institutions, basically network and partner with other institutions to do research. So being a part of somebody else's study, collaborating on their study, having a role for what it is that you want to do within that research study, because collaborations, they make all the difference, in terms of your research portfolio. Most people don't have, 6, 7, 8 R1s all by themselves. It's multidisciplinary research. So, and kinesiology is important in terms of, or at least physical activity is important in terms of, brain health, because of what physical activity does for the brain in terms of BDNF and other sorts of chemicals in the brain. So those are the things that I would suggest in order to start trying to get more research at your institution.
Next question. Anybody else back here? Have a hand up?
Thank you.
All right.
I got it right here. So I guess we'll end on maybe one final question, and then each speaker can summarize just kind of their thoughts or when working with community partners. So they're, I think of them as sometimes like the lifeblood of doing, especially CBPR types of research. How do you go about working with or advising community organizations, or do you have conversations with them about like, hey, this is how you protect your organization, or this is how you go about negotiating or having conversations about, okay, you want to come in and do research. Like, how do we help the community organizations know how to work with researchers from a collaborative standpoint? If you all could provide some thoughts on that.
I would say for what I've seen and what I've done specifically with churches is showing them their buy-in, right? So if they have that buy-in, or what can we as researchers or the university do for them, and they see the benefit, that's a big factor, determining factor on if they're going to work with us. That's community groups, organizations. That's mostly everything that we've dealt with. Just showing them the benefit and showing them what they can get. And money doesn't hurt. And when I say money doesn't hurt, how can you, specifically for churches, how can you assist them in growing one of their programs, one of their outreach programs? Because they're going to support you in any way that if you show them they're reaching other students, other people at least.
Yeah, I'd say outreach from, I think, university and government groups really matters. I think that there's historically been an unfortunate so-called town-gown conflict that has hampered this work, I think, that I've seen in all the places I've been, I think, throughout my career. I think that's not only to be avoided, but it's really detrimental, I think, to progress. I clearly think that going forward, all too often, the lead group may be the community-based group. It may be the church. It may be the group or the entity that has individuals who I think are the so-called trusted messengers in the community, because those are people are likely to get individuals to join, to stay involved in research and kind of finish projects. I've been at this part all day, but one struggle is dropouts, and the people you can't collect and glean data that's useful and has vitality over time, utility, I should say, with high dropout rates, I think, of Black males. So I think we have to kind of balance the playing field. I love my colleagues' comment that you need resources and support, but I think we have to kind of work to end the historical tension between these groups that I think has kind of blocked progress. It's going to be essential, to the early point you made, what may happen, I think, in contemporary political times, even more of a reason for us to find ways to kind of work together to kind of get over some of the artificial hurdles that many of us, right or wrong, may be anticipating be coming our way here shortly. And I end by saying I think it's also true that although you need resources and money, that's not all you need. I think you need that sense of fairness, they call it fundamental fairness. People have to believe that they're being treated well. And if we can, I think, communicate that across spectrum, I think it's likely to matter, it's likely to work. And I think that those issues are going to be important going forward for research to be valuable in the matter.
Yeah, agree with both of the speakers, and also would say, community advisory boards is a good way to try to connect with the community, where you have institutional review. There's institutional review boards that all of the ethics boards always look at it, but it's always those boards may not be representative, and even if you tried to make them representative, they may not be part of the community that you're trying to become a true partner with. So these community advisory boards, where you really are working with the community, they represent, you would run the research program by them before you even get the IRB approval, get their input of what may or may not work and what's practical or not practical. That way they're vested in it and they feel like they're part of it. And to the support part, they're volunteering their time, so they need something in return. So sometimes, you could. It doesn't need to be a lot, but if there's some sort of funding to just reimburse them for their time and commitment to give you that think tank, that thought tank, and feedback on your studies is a good way. And again, if that becomes longitudinal, the right way to do it is have it longitudinal, so you're always working with that group.
I agree with everything that's been said. I think that finding that synergy between what that community organization sees as a problem and your ability to conduct research on that problem is important. So I think that that's really the basis of it, and being able to give something back to the church, I think is also, or church or community organization, whomever it may be. And I do think that monetary rewards, or monetary contributions, again, doesn't have to be large amounts. I think that goes a long way, because it really shows the organization that you recognize the importance of the work that they're doing for you or with you. And so I think those things are also very important. But I think a lot of it, really the basis of it, is having this shared sort of, we want to address diabetes, and you do diabetes research, and so what this research is going to benefit the people, my constituency of my community-based organization. I think that's where it all starts, and from there, I think there's a lot of things that can be done to work together to address the health issue.
Alrighty. So thank you all, gentlemen, for your valuable thoughts. We're going to have one final kind of summary from each of you. A successful research pathway. What does that look like in your minds as it relates to working at HBCUs and the work that you all are leading? You all have such great positions in terms of seeing a lot of these things through. What does success look like in your all's mind?
So I would say to the brother's point from TSU in answering this question, I would say that we need to insert the mental health awareness into education. Letting them know what mental health awareness is, putting it out there. The Black community itself, we know this. We're saying it. You can agree with me. We don't address mental health because we're, as men, Black men, we're supposed to be the strong ones. We're supposed to be the ones that don't bend. We're supposed to be the one on the TV that the cameras talk to first, right? That's kind of changed a little bit now, but we are supposed to be the strong ones, and we're the men of the house. But I don't think that we're allowing in education ourselves, or allowing those students to identify those stressors. What are those stressors? What are the things that you just don't, as the students would say, well, jive with, right? What's the thing that that gets them? Identify the stressors, identify those, give them time whenever they're in classes to have a breathing break. So we have to start while we're teaching them early to allow them to know that it's okay. If we allow them to know it's okay, then we would hope at the end point, it would be that they're more aware, they're more understanding, and they're more free to talk about mental health awareness and talk about mental health itself. So that's what I would say. Let's figure out a way that we can put it in not only kinesiology, but English, math. Like, how do we put mental health awareness in those courses to do that? We've had a mental health break at Southern University. This was a free day, a mental health break. I think we have to do some of those things in courses because some professors make it so hard to accomplish what you said by, hey, I want to do what you do. Some professors make it hard. And we have to understand that those stresses also, along with their socioeconomic background, all of that stuff coupled with what's going on with them at school, in their life, all of those are stresses. We got to be able to identify those on the front end.
Dr. Bailey?
just an outstanding point by this good alpha man, I'll say. But I will file a grievance that I'm the psychiatrist and seek my mental health answers. So, I'm not so sure if I can tolerate that. But I'll take a stab at it. I think, and I've loved all your comments, especially those from our new dean. I mean, I'd love to see a project that's collaborative with Tulane and LSU and Ochsner, Xavier, addressing one of the main problems here in New Orleans. We could address violence. I mean, there's huge violence issues in play. We could address obesity and diabetes, which is we have a consumption problem that I think leads to early mortality in this setting. I think the dean actually mentioned issues regarding sickle cell. But the big issue that I'm always concerned about, a lot of time in DC early in my life, and you see this graph where there's about a 12 or 13 year expected length of life difference, whether you're on the north side of DC or the south side of DC, and they're 10 miles apart. I don't want that to be New Orleans under my watch. So there are remarkably important challenges for us, and I think targets for us to pursue, I think, in ongoing research. Collaboration matters. I think joint resources, I love the comment earlier in regards to where to find more resources, but I think it's going to take, a commitment to address the problems that I think are relevant for our community here. So many would argue, a local focus with kind of a national approach, I think has a lot of value and a lot of utility. You'd love to see that kind of happen, and that this may be an impetus to do so, a program like this, to get us on the same page going forward.
I love that deal of collaboration, especially in resource-limited areas like South Louisiana and the Gulf Coast. I mean, sometimes I think we compete for limited resources and say, how do we work together to benefit the community and actually bring more resources into the community? So I love that idea. Look, I think success looks like representation. I got to be honest. That's how we define success. You see more physicians that are black and brown. There are more scientists that are black and brown, PhDs, and to your point of in the important position, leaders in the important positions of making funding decisions or areas to focus on in research. And especially from the physician standpoint, we have not made great progress. So there was an article in the New England Journal of Medicine in 2019 that looked at 1978, 3.1% of the medical school population in the United States was African American males. In 2019, it was 2.9%. It actually had gone down a bit. And so this representation is important, and it takes focus and it takes effort. You have to declare it, you have to have a strategy, you have to have a plan. But I'm always taken back to what President Verrett has told me over the years, and he says, the talent is right here. The talent is right here in our community. They just need to be nourished. These young minds need to be nourished. And I would say on the science side, that's where we should be, our effort should be, is nourishing these great minds.
So to me, success would look like a greater number of research studies that are going on at HBCUs in 5 years compared to what we have going on right now. And specifically within brain health, okay? So to me, that means that you have administrations that have made a priority of increasing the amount of research funding that comes into the institution, that there's infrastructure within the institutions in order to make that happen in terms of sponsored projects departments, getting IRBs up to speed, having faculty be able to buy out time to actually conduct the research. It means that the community is well aware of the academic institution's efforts, and we have done a good job of building trust. We have increasing numbers of Black men in research studies, either because you're doing a general study and you're bringing people in, or because you have studies specifically on this population. And I think it means more workforce coming in who want to do research. And so I think that that's really what success looks like. And I would hope that in 5 years, when I come back to the 10th annual Black Men's Brain Health, yes, that vision is achieved. So to me, it's increased research funding so that we can get answers to many of these questions that we don't currently have answers to right now.
Well, thank you, gentlemen, and I can definitely get behind the 10th annual Black Men Brain Health Conference and in so many years. And so we thank you for your time and your expertise and your knowledge, and we'll end it at that.